Marcus Bennett was no ordinary man.
A senior FBI official, he embodied the federal authority at her most methodical and implacable. As 47 years old, he had climbed the ranks thanks to his hard work, his sharp intelligence and iron discipline inherited from his military past. Tall, athletic, shaved head, piercing gaze, he naturally commanded respect. He was neither exuberant nor demonstrative.
Observed, analyzed, acted.
His journey was a success story that few black men could claim. Born in a disadvantaged neighborhood of Baltimore, he had grown up in an environment where chances of ending up in prison were higher than chances of getting a college degree. But thanks to an unyielding mother and a mentor who believed in him, Marcus had not only survived, but thrived. His service record was impressive. He had served in several sensitive divisions of the FBI: cybercrime, financial crimes, national intelligence. His expertise in computer security and strategic intelligence had earned him the opportunity to be seconded to the White House on several occasions. But what many didn't know was the invisible weight he carried every day. Being a black man in the upper echelons of the FBI meant having to be irreproachable. A mistake that would be forgiven to a white colleague would likely cost him his career. He knew the game, and he played it better than anyone. It was therefore with a precise mission that he arrived in Fairview, oversee an investigation into a series of cyber attacks targeting several federal institutions in the region. A sensitive case involving Russian hackers and illegal transfers of confidential data. All day long, he held meetings with the local forces, the prosecutor's office, and the judicial authorities. As usual, he let little emotion show. His role was not to make friends, but to ensure that the investigation moved forward. When he left the prosecutor's office in late evening, he felt fatigue weighing on his shoulders. He loved his work, but he also knew the sacrifices.
Loneliness, constant pressure, lack of a stable personal life.
He got into his black sedan, an unmarked car with tinted windows, and drove slowly through the quiet streets of Fairview.
The night was cool, the wind light.
He turned on the radio, enjoying the silence of a lonely drive after a stressful day. But what he didn't notice right away was the police car which had just pulled up behind him. Officer Daniel Cooper, a white police officer in his 30s, had just finished his shift when he saw the black sedan driving peacefully on Jefferson Avenue. Tinted windows. Driven by a black man in a suit. For Cooper, that was enough to arouse his suspicions. He felt a rush of adrenaline. He couldn't say why exactly. Maybe it was the late hour, maybe it was the car that was too elegant, too anonymous, or simply the instinct he had built up over the years. An instinct which, in reality, was often nothing more than a well-entrenched prejudice. Without taking the time to think further, he activated his flashing lights and ordered the vehicle to stop. Marcus Bennett immediately saw red and blue lights flashing in his rearview mirror. He sighed deeply, feeling the fatigue of the day weighing on his shoulders. He knew exactly what was happening. He had experienced it too often. He put on his flasher and parked his sedan on the shoulder with calculated slowness.
No sudden movements.
In his mind, a whole well-established protocol was put in place. He knew the script by heart. He knew that in these kinds of situations, what was at stake was not just his dignity or his patience, but potentially his life. He rolled down his window and waited. Cooper got out of his vehicle, his gait assured, his hand resting nonchalantly on his belt, not far from his weapon. He approached the car, scanning the interior.
Good evening, sir.
Driver's license and vehicle documents, please. His voice was dry, mechanical, devoid of courtesy. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He took the time to unlock the glove box, calmly took out the documents and handed them to her without a word. Cooper looked over them quickly, his gaze flickering between the papers and Marcus' impassive face. Something about this man irritated him. An air of mastery, of quiet confidence that gave him the impression that someone was looking down on him. He frowned. "Do you know why I stopped you?" he asked, still looking for a valid justification. Marcus raised an eyebrow, his face still neutral. "No, but I suppose you'll tell me."
A cyberofenoiens ran through Cooper.
He hated that tone. This icy calm which gave the impression that the man in front of him dominated him in this exchange. Your vehicle matches the description of a suspicious car reported in the area. Marcus didn't let anything show, but he knew. He knew it was a lie. He heard it in the policeman's slight hesitation, in the way he avoided meeting his gaze. He had seen others. Good. In that case, call your central office and ask them to confirm this information.
Silence. Cooper hesitated.
He knew full well that if he called, his pretext would be shattered. And yet he refused to lose face. The man in front of him clearly didn't take him seriously. He had to regain control of the situation. Sir, get out of the vehicle. Marcus didn't move. Have I committed a violation, Agent? I told you to get out. Cooper repeated, more nervous this time. He instinctively placed his hand on the butt of his weapon.
Marcus inhaled slowly, controlling the irritation rising within him.
He knew exactly how these situations escalated. The story was always the same: an overzealous police officer, authority questioned, and a black man who had to watch his every move if he wanted to see tomorrow. With deliberate slowness, he opened the door and got out. He raised his hand slightly, not too high, just enough to show that he posed no threat.
Put your hands on the oath.
Marcus looked Cooper straight in the eye. Agent, I'm going to take out my badge.
I'm. Hands on the oath.
Cooper yelled, drawing his gun. Time seemed to stand still. The tension became almost palpable in the cold night air. Marcus stood still, analyzing each parameter in a fraction of a second.
The policeman's racing pulse.
His breathing slightly ragged. His nervous finger, too close to the trigger. With a measured gesture, he slowly opened his jacket and took out his golden badge, shining under the glow of the flashing lights.
I am Special Agent Marcus Bennett, Federal Bureau of Investigation. Pause.
You have just made a big mistake. Cooper's face instantly lost color. The tension was at its peak. Cooper lowered his gun slowly, his fingers clenching against the butt, as if still hesitant to let go. He looked nervously from Marcus to the federal agents who had just arrived in a hurry. The black vehicle with discreet flashing lights had stopped behind the patrol car, and two men in dark suits had gotten out with almost military precision, weapons ready to fire. Chief, is everything okay? One of them asked, approaching Marcus, without taking his eyes off Cooper. Marcus, still impassive, did not respond immediately. He adjusted his jacket with a slow, almost calculated movement, giving Cooper time to fully appreciate the extent of his mistake. The officer seemed frozen, his features contorted in silent panic. He knew he had just crossed a line that he could no longer erase. Note the number of this agent carefully, Marcus ordered in a cold, sharp voice. We are going to have a very serious conversation at the police station. Cooper opened his mouth to protest, but no sound came out. He knew what was coming next. A few hours later, at the Fairview police station, the atmosphere was electric. The case had not only shaken the police station, it was moving much higher up the hierarchy. Murmurs were already circulating among the officers present. Some avoided Cooper's gaze, others exchanged glances heavy with implication. In an office with drawn blinds, the police chief, a massive man with graying hair, scrutinized Marcus with calculated caution. Sitting behind a desk cluttered with reports, he seemed to weigh each word before speaking.
Listen, Agent Bennett,
he said finally, his fingers intertwined on the desk. Cooper is a good cop. He made an error in judgment, but we can handle this internally. Marcus leaned back slightly in his chair, his eyes fixed on the police chief. Handle this internally, he repeated, his voice calm but sharp. This isn't just a misunderstanding, boss. This is a systemic problem. The leader clenched his jaw. His look betrayed a frustration that he tried to mask under a facade of authority. What do you want then? He asked, more abruptly than he intended. Let's fire him. Marcus didn't respond immediately. He let a silence settle in, the kind of silence that forces the other to think, to feel the weight of the situation. And quote, "I want your department to publicly acknowledge this mistake," end quote, he finally continued. And not just with a vague and non-committal press release. "I want figures, statistics, and concrete measures. I want to see reforms on roadside enforcement practices. Otherwise..." He paused for a moment, tilting his head slightly, as if to ensure that the leader understood the seriousness of his words. "Otherwise, I will personally make sure this story makes national headlines." The police chief took a slow breath. He understood that he had no choice. Days later, under pressure from the FBI and the media, the Fairview Police Department was forced to act. What began as a simple unjustified arrest had transformed into a real national scandal. Local news channels picked up the story, relaying images of the scene filmed by an onboard camera and testimonies from witnesses. On social networks, the hashtag #JusticeForMarcus had gone viral, forcing the authorities to react. Faced with public outrage, the police chief appeared at a press conference, his face closed, reading an official statement in a neutral tone. The Fairview Police Department is committed to overhauling its procedures to ensure fair treatment for all citizens, regardless of ethnicity. We will implement mandatory training on racial profiling and review our STOP protocols. But behind those carefully chosen words, the tension was palpable. For many officers, this announcement seemed like a forced capitulation. Some whispered that Cooper had been sacrificed to appease the spirits. Others wondered if this reform would really change anything. Cooper was not given a second chance. Suspended at first, he was finally dismissed, his record tarnished by this affair. When he left the police station for the last time, his eyes met those of his colleagues. Some gave him a discreet sign of support, others looked away. But no one could deny the reality. Fairview had been shaken like never before.
Marcus left town soon after.
He did not linger to savor what was already called the Bennett affair. He knew his name would continue to circulate in conversations, in internal police department reports, and in newspaper columns. But it wasn't his personal victory that mattered. That night, he had not only defended his honor. He had forced an entire city to confront a truth it refused to see. Systemic racism was not a rumor, nor a simple misunderstanding. It was real, it was rooted, and it had to be fought. And for Marcus, it was a victory far greater than just the downfall of a biased police officer. It was a battle won in a much larger war.